Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for C3 Converse, presented by Nielsen. My name is Shannon Sarikaku. I'm the Guest Services Coordinator of the 36th edition of the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival, presented by Visual Communications. We'd like to thank everyone for making this festival possible, especially the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Comcast NBC Universal, California Arts Council, SAG-AFTRA Producers Industry Advancement and Cooperative Fund, the National Endowment for the Arts, and HBO and Warner Media. Also, a special thanks to all of our community partner organizations for their valuable work and the continued support of visual communications. To lead our next conversation, please welcome our senior programmer, Lindy Liang. Lindy enjoys supporting community building and advocacy through the arts. She balances the challenges and joys of being a dilettante in her other lives as a film and media educator, arts administrator, and archivist. She cares deeply about building AAPI and BIPOC power in the film and media industries, and she's a huge part of what we do here at BC. And we're grateful to have her on the team. So take it away, Lindy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Shannon, for that lovely introduction. I want to again welcome you to the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival produced by Visual Communication. This is our final series of C3 Artist Conversation for this festival. Again, my name is Lindy Liang. I'm one of the senior programmers of the festival. I am zooming in today from Silver Lake, Los Angeles on the native lands of the Tongva, Chumash, and Kish peoples. And if you want to listen to the conversation with closed caption, we're going to be dropping a link in the chat right now. So click on that and it should open a window with that audio transcript. So I want to thank everyone again for who helped make this festival possible year in, year out, and to thank you to our community partner organizations for their valuable work and for their continued support of visual communications. It's our 50th year, so this is a milestone for us. So without further ado, let's get started with our artist conversation today. Please help me welcome from Waikīkī, Director Chris Kahunahana, and producer Nicole Neone. Can you guys turn on your cameras and unmute your mics? It's lovely to see you guys on our final day of conversations. How are you guys doing right now? Where are you zooming in from? Oh, Chris and Nicole?
Oh
yeah, I just wanted to ask you, how are you guys doing and where are you guys zooming in from today?
I'm doing great, thank you. I am zooming in from Honolulu, Hawaii. And it's a sunny 85 degrees.
And I'm in Manoa. I'm in Manoa Valley. And yeah, it's nice. Good trade winds today.
Well, I mean, I'm really thrilled to be hosting this conversation and delighted that you both can join us today. I wanted to tell the audience that this is Chris's feature debut, and we are really excited to be presenting the West Coast premiere. I know you've been working on this project for some time. It's been a passion project. You've been workshopping it and refining it. And you just world premiered it actually at Urban World in New York just earlier last month. And I know it's such a unique narrative, the likes of which we haven't seen much of in Hawaiian and Pacific Islander film and media making. So I wanted to kick our conversation off by just asking both Chris and Nicole is how did you guys like the impetus for this project, and also kind of a little bit about the initial journey of getting this film made. I know it's gone through different iterations, and yeah, there's been a process. So Chris, can you chime in about that, and then Nicole, you can jump in as well. Let's talk about helping Chris with that project and launching it.
Thanks, Lindy. So I had been running a nightclub in Chinatown, Honolulu called Next Door, which was originally a screening venue for an independent film festival a partner and myself ran in the 90s, mid-2000s. And I've always wanted to make a feature film. So I had been creating short films for a while, and that's how I got introduced to Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. I had a short film called Lahaina Noon, which I loved screening in Los Angeles Asian Film Festival. But I had written a screenplay. It was about the same time that I shot that film. And the story was based on the characters that I had become familiar or intimate. I mean, I got to know really well working in Chinatown, Honolulu. I based the characters on the people were part of my neighborhood for 10 years. And I originally wrote a feature screenplay called Karaoke Kings, which was very similar to same universe, same world that Waikīkī takes place in, but it was more focused on the Amy character, who happened to be, I owned the nightclub, and right next to the nightclub was a bar who had been there for, I don't know, 30 some odd years. Karaoke hostess bar run by Amy, who I based Amy's character on. And I wrote this screenplay, Karaoke Kings, and I was, had the privilege and honor to be accepted into the Sundance Institute's, at that time it was called Native Labs. I think they changed their name to the Indigenous Film Program. And I got to work with great mentors, Bird Running Water and Chris Eyre, and they helped me develop the screenplay and helped me fix a lot of the issues I was having with it. So I was in the program initially. Then from that program, I got invited to participate in a Sundance Labs screenwriting intensive. And through that program, we again refined that screenplay. But I felt while I was working on that screenplay, it kept getting better. Karaoke Kings kept getting better, but it seemed like it was getting farther and farther away. It's becoming more of a complicated story, and I thought, budget-wise, it's getting out of my reach. So I, in the need to make a film sooner than later, I decided to cherry pick some of the best characters and scenes from Karaoke Kings and write another screenplay that I thought I could shoot like on the weekends with my friends. And I quickly wrote a screenplay called Waikīkī, and it definitely wasn't something that you could shoot on a weekend, but I didn't know it at that time. So that's when we decided, let's just make this film, just go ahead and figure out how to shoot something and not have to wait around to get greenlit by larger budget films, larger budget pictures. And at that time, we decided to just go ahead, even with whatever finances we had at the time, which was personal friends, family. And that's when Nicole came aboard, and she, as one of our producers, helped us raise the funding for our film. And how did we do that, Nicole?
Well, I think even to go further back between that part, one thing that I really liked about the screenplay when it was still in the Karaoke Kings iteration is that Chris was touching on a lot of things that Hawaii is such a microcosm for a lot of things that happen in the world. And I think that, Waikīkī sort of developed with realizing which one of those issues were really standing up, and he was going through a transitional space with, really transitioning from having a movie house to making films. And with reading what it transitioned to with Waikīkī, it completely blew my mind away, because you could absolutely see the allegory forming of characters completely embodying Hawaii, or different characters embodying, the concept of Waikīkī as a brand. And I think all of those layers started to really sort of surface, and not all of those things are necessarily positive. And so the name Waikīkī is very loaded in and of itself. And so the funding and getting people to be excited about something that sort of reveals more of the underbelly and touches on issues that face Indigenous peoples throughout the world, really, was tricky. It's a bit of a trick, you know, people think Waikīkī and they go, oh yes, and then you kind of let them know a bit more of what's being spoken on, and it's a bit of a trickier sell. But it's, you know, people have known Chris for years, and people have, you know, really trusted his vision and know how talented he is and know what an effective visual communicator he is. And so that element made it very, very easy. People adore Chris, and it was, people were really just excited that he was going to do a feature and anything to support. We were lucky in that regard.
That's wonderful. I could hear of this, like this community support, and there's a community that wanted to have this, just wanted to realize this project. And for Chris and for the community, and for it to kind of talk about the community in a real way, in a truly real, non-mainstream way. I guess after you decided on the story you wanted to portray on screen, I know based on these semi-autobiographical components that you've embedded in the script. So how were you, like, I guess maybe like talk about the process of getting not only the script together, but also finding your key actors, key personnel to be involved. You know, your two main actors, and maybe a little bit about, yeah, were they part of an open call, or were they people that you already knew about and or recommended to you?
I think that really touches on one of the important things, at least in Hawaii, that made me really grateful that they existed, was, you know, small community theater. When we were, you know, figuring this out, it was like, these are intense characters, where do we even find this? And Chris was like, let's go to Kumukuhua and let's see, you know, who are the actors doing stuff. And it was, you know, there's these little pockets, I think, in all communities where you just find these major shining stars. And I absolutely couldn't see it. I was just like, this is what, but Chris saw completely, was like, we got 2 stars right there. We sat in on a play, and he absolutely was just blown away. I think, Chris, you can speak more to that.
No, yeah, she's correct. You know what? When we decided we're gonna do this film, one of the first things I knew of ultimate importance was that the character of Kea was such a difficult role to play, that without the right actress, there wasn't going to be any film. So the first thing I did before I cast anyone else or moved forward with the project is I went to a lot of the community theaters, and I went to as many theaters that I could find, and I sat in on some great plays, and I looked at the talent that was available, and there was this actress who happened to have been in the play that I didn't get to see, but was highly recommended by one of our great friends. And she said, you need to go check out this actress. And they didn't remember what her name was. And I just so happened to walk into a Kumukuhua play, and I saw this actress perform, and I knew right away that there was something about her. She wasn't just like a typical actor who's looking for the attention. I could tell that she really wanted to dig into the roles that she played. And so I approached her, and I was, of course, it's always strange when someone says, hey, I'm going to cast you in a feature film, let's meet for coffee and talk it over. But we met, and I immediately knew she was the right person for the role. She had a depth to her that wasn't obvious when I had seen her in our stage play. And luckily for all of us, is that she really liked the story. She found things in the story which she had never seen before portrayed on screen about Hawaii. So she decided she wanted to do it. And then we had an open casting call through our agent, Kenny Bishkoff, casting agent. We had an open call to fill out the other roles, and through that casting, we found Kaino McGee, who plays the tow yard security. We also found Kimo Kahoano, actually.
Oh yeah.
Kimo Kahunahana came to our casting, and it was strange. He was there was this like Corvette, I think, sitting in the shadows behind this building with this gentleman had his shades on, and he just like angrily talking.
Blazer. He had a
velvet blazer
with an aloha shirt. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa. I'm like, does anybody know the mafioso looking guy sitting in the parking lot? Because, you know, I'm like, did we piss somebody off already? I mean, we haven't even shot anything. I was like, man, does anybody owe anybody money? Because, like, he looks real sketchy. But, I mean, so he came in, and he's a consummate gentleman and professional. He's like, gave the best performance as Kimo Kahunahana. I mean, that's who he is. He lives that. But from that same casting, there's Jason Quinn, who plays Brandon, also came in for the screen the audition. And
boyfriend in the film.
This is the boyfriend.
Yeah, Brandon, and we saw him with Kia in the play as well. And he was just a minor character in the play, but he was such a standout, and we were so happy he came to the casting. And at first, you know, he's a classically trained actor, and so at first he does very much the boo, you know, and there was sort of, I don't remember verbatim, but there was sort of a comment of like, well, I mean, it's pigeon though, and it's actual pigeon, it's not. And he was like, I grabbed Castle. I grew up Ewa Beach. We're like, oh my, okay. So he completely shocked that we're like, oh, nah, you at Castle for real. And so he was like a secret moke. We didn't even realize he like flung that moke door open, and we were like, oh, okay, right on, authentic, okay. It's very cool. That's my favorite part from that casting is finding out Brandon was from Ewa Beach. I was like, dang, okay.
Yeah. No, the Brandon, Jason Quinn was one of the best things about having been able to cast Jason in the role of Brandon was that because a lot of the scenes required a sense of trust between the actors, we later found out, you know, after the casting that Jason and Danielle, you know, they're great friends. They've been friends for many years within the theater and outside of the theater. So there's a built-in level of trust going into filming the film that I think would have took time to develop otherwise with an actor that they didn't have that relationship established already.
Well, that fills in a lot for me in terms of thinking about your conception of the script writing and how do you work with actors, you know, since you have this context of these local actors who kind of knew each other because they're part of that same local scene and have worked together and knew of each other's work in a very intimate way. So that kind of explains a lot of how I can see how you worked to make this very kind of intimate project, but that actually speaks volumes about broader issues in Hawaii and in the Pacific Islands that we don't see in mainstream media. So I was ambitious. I was impressed by the ambitiousness of the film, and also the somewhat at the very end of the day, like the simplicity of the messages that you're trying to convey. If you watch it a few times. I wanted to talk a little bit about like your kind of the nitty gritty of the production shoot and the assemblage of the film, because I know you worked with Ryan Miyamoto on the cinematography, and it just lends that. I mean, like I wonder about your collaboration with him to kind of like create that specific look you wanted to have in the film, that visual style that can convey like Waikiki as a character, you know, a character, you know, that stands kind of almost in equal part with the two main leads you have for the story. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, your working relationship or like conceiving a visual style of the film.
Yeah, quickly, I want to go back to the casting. So
okay.
After I found Kia, the first thing I did was like, I need someone with like some star power, someone who had name recognition, and someone who, you know, had tried to cast the Wolf character here in Hawaii, but I thought this role could be played by somebody who, you know, had a little bit of a panache or a name to themselves that they could to lend to the project. And actually, I had saw an actor, he played a lot of ninja or bad guy roles in films, and I was like, man, this guy, you know, he's a great actor. I wish he had, you know, the opportunity to play a role with a little bit more substance. We'll talk about it later, but I ended up cutting a lot of his character's dialogue and the scenes with this character, just because to make the story fit. But initially, I thought that Peter Shinkoda, who was a great actor, could and would be an amazing Wolf. So now to go forward into what you had asked about working with Ryan Miyamoto. You know, so Ryan and I got to work on Lahaina Num initially, and that's how we came to understand each other's visual style and our working. We created a working relationship. The best thing about Ryan is that Ryan's like myself. He will absolutely give everything to the project to get it done. I mean, there's no quit in Ryan. You can't say, he'll never say, oh, that's impossible. He'll say, you know, he'll keep working at it to make sure you get it. And so, you know, me and him are a little bit opposite, where I'm like a little bit more demanding and pushy, and he's a lot calmer. He doesn't show his anger or his stress level. So it was perfect mix for myself, because it would have been hugely a confrontational relationship if both of us, under the stresses of making this feature film, were, you know, meeting each other at that level. So it was great because I could always turn to him, and it was like provided like a level of comfort for me. It's like I never had to. I just say it once, and then Ryan would be, you know, walk off, and I mean, I'm sure he yelled at his dog or something. I don't know how he vented, you know, his frustrations with, you know, shooting a low budget feature film is a daunting challenge. It's like you are under budget, I mean, you never have enough money and you never have enough time, and everyone's sacrificing, I mean, living the film, not like every film, but the added stress of, you know, trying to do something like this ambitious with our budget and time constraints. I think I'm glad to have worked with Ryan. And visual style wise, you know, Ryan's he has an amazing eye for cinematography, and his, you know, we talk about a scene and he could come up with, like, you know, looks, and that's why I think we worked well together. And we also got to work with his family member, Keali'i Grace. He's an amazing artist and talented cinematographer, filmmaker. I mean, watch out for that name. He's going to be doing something very soon. So, you know, it was just an amazing experience. Besides those two as cinematographers, we got to work with Vince Keala Lucero as a camera person who, you know, his credits, he's got a lot more IMDb credits than all of, you know, myself for sure, but he's worked on everything from Marvel to National Geographics. And so, I mean, we just had such a talented crew that it made it a pleasure to be able to shoot something together. Oh, by the way, those are all Hawaiians.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, that's like all this local talent there, there, that you
it was really important to work with our Hawaiian community filmmakers and talent. You know, it's like giving us the opportunity to do something for ourselves on a larger level. I mean, we all, you know, everyone works on film sets for major productions. You know, they use Hawaii as their backlot, but this was an opportunity for us to tell our own stories. And I think that's ultimately the goal of filmmakers, is we want to contribute to the conversation. We don't want to just be talked about. We want to, you know, we all have something to say also.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, me and Ryan are classmates at Kahunahana. And then Danny is 1 year older than us, and then Vince is a couple years older than us. It was funny having that. But like Chris was saying, I don't think people realize how much local talent is here, and everything gets shot here. And even I remember, and this is way back when we were doing a Kickstarter, and it was like, oh, was it hard to find you know, a crew to be able to, and it was like, no, it was very easy. There's incredibly talented people who live here. And I hope that you know, the local film industry can increase, because it seems like there comes a point in time where everyone's got to move. They have to move to LA, or they have to move away, because they have, you know, the skill set. But it would be awesome if the scene here could continue to expand as it already has. Because there's a wealth
Yes.
of talent.
Yeah, there's so many talented Hawaii filmmakers, writers, directors, you know, that are coming up. I mean, you guys know, you guys program all our work, so we really appreciate that, you know, giving us a platform and the opportunity to share our works. Really gives us the opportunity to continue making films. So I appreciate it.
You're most
Thank
welcome.
you.
And I mean, I see this film as kind of being that potential like gateway film for people to understand, to see that there's such a lot of like talent in the Hawaiian, in the local Hawaiian industry, and that a lot of folks untapped talent, and this film will help kind of generate that I think buzz around, and also just highlight and the fact that there's this talent there that remains untapped. So I mean, with that, I just wanted to talk a little bit. I mean, on the surface, when you read a synopsis of this film, it's a Native Hawaiian hula dancer who is escaping an abusive relationship. She has this encounter with this mysterious man played by Peter Shinkoda, and then she goes off on this surrealist kind of journey of enlightenment. I feel like, and then after that, we'll have to watch and really to see what goes on. I mean, film mixes so many, I feel like, genre conventions and at times veers into kind of very experimental kind of storytelling. And I just wanted to, I guess, ask a little bit, this may be like where I throw in my film academic hat, and I just see so many cinematic influences on it. Of course, David Lynch is an influence, I think, just from first watch, just because his films all talk about, or they're invested in the dark side of like the unspoken truths about American society and culture. So I just feel like you kind of have this kind of parallel journey alongside of him. Are there any, besides Lynch, and are there other influences that you have been directly or indirectly, I think, inspired by, I should say, for this film or other films, just filmmakers in general who inspire you in your art?
Well, I mean, as a filmmaker, film fan, you know, a person who loves films, I mean, there's obviously Lynch, but there's, you know, I don't know how everyone influences my work, because they all do in some even subconscious way. But one of my favorite filmmakers is definitely Kubrick. You know, I think he was and Kubrick and Kurosawa is like, I tend to gravitate towards watching the films that I like over and over and over again, and then I, you know, veer off sometimes and watch like a whole director's set. But there's so many great, you know, American filmmakers currently working that, I mean, I haven't watched the film since I started editing this film, because just, I find it so distracting to watch another filmmaker's work while you're working in something, because it's either gonna make you question what you're doing because you can never achieve their level of perfection, or it'll make you think that your ideas aren't original. So, you know, like I tend to put myself into a little box, and I only speak to, you know, my greatest influence, obviously, or not obviously, but for me, nature has always been my hugest influence. It's like the stream, or the clouds, or the trees. I mean, those things really, I think, embed in me like a rhythm, or a feel, like a breath. How nature breathes is how I feel. is most inspirational to me as an artist.
I think the thing that's, or at least when I speak about his work and stuff, I think one thing that's always sort of interesting in regard to like inspiration or what box even to put him in, it's been tricky because America, I mean, not to get, you threw buzzword in academic and now I'm like just gonna go off the but being in the context of being an occupied country, so you know, Hawaii was overthrown, all of these things, right? What has been tricky, and it comes out even more so in the way that Chris is inspired by, or the way that he communicates, is the fact that we are technically American, technically not. Depends on who you speak to. And so when you look at Chris's work, I mean, even in terms of the shots, it's, if this thing could have been an entire film of wides, it would have been. Like, all of Chris's shots they look like 17th century Chinese paintings. They're all a tiny, tiny human, and just, he is communicating with the mountain. Like, he forgot a human was even there. And he's like, right, guys? So you put that into the context of being an American filmmaker, it's very tricky. And you know, he'll say things like, oh, well, it's because I'm inspired by nature, whatever. And it, at least from the aspect of a producer and, you know, talking about selling and talking about money and stuff, it's tricky with an American audience because that doesn't necessarily compute in a Western space of, but he means that literally, of I literally went and hung out with some rocks and had an energy conversion and spoke to my kupuna and had a moment with this specific rain that comes in this specific area. And it's tricky. The inspiration thing, it's I know that it's difficult because of that American title. It does create some problems when I'm like, I hear him and I'm like, I don't think people realize he means that literally, that he will go and have a conversation with the ocean. And that's very normal from an Eastern space, you know, or a Pacific space. But yeah, sorry to throw that in there. Okay. Chris's inspiration.
I mean, no, thank you for kind of like illuminating additional information about like Chris's inspirations. And I know I believe you when you say nature, and that's something that's so insightful for me just to think about right now, process, because I see these other, I mean, we are, you know, I see these other influence in your film, and I also, like, now I see nature, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it adds a different layer for our reading of the film. And yeah, as Nicole alluded to, there's just like this idea of like Americanness and from a native Hawaiian native perspective that I think this film directly challenges, you know, subtly, not in an overt political way, but through its artistry and just the imagery and the storytelling. And I think that's what I was talking about when I was like, if you read a synopsis of this film, you kind of like, you get a gist of what you're gonna see, but you see more than that. And it's just have to, it's kind of like an audio visual experience. You need to watch it to kind of fully, the storytelling is not just between the dialogue that's articulated between the characters. It's really that it's evoked in the space of the film. And I feel like that's what I meant by the genre mixing and I mean, in the experimental storytelling. So I'm getting a bigger picture, and I hope the audience.
It's true on the screenplay on the page. There'd be like a page of talking about the context of the scene, and you know, the dialogue. There's not a ton of dialogue. It's not like a that kind of picture. It's more of a visual story. So you know, the actors were amazing, because I would just say, you know, there wouldn't be much on the page, and we'd show up in the location. I'm gonna say, hey, this is the setup, this is the context, this is why this matters, you know. And I wouldn't say, you know, this is necessarily what's going on in the character's life, but I'd say, you know, there's the sky and the rain, and then there's the ocean, and you know, that's, I mean, luckily we got to keep some of it in the final picture, but there was a lot more context in previous cuts.
Okay, which kind of goes back to my earlier question about like, just like, I know this project is like, it was very ambitious, and so you had to make some decisions along the way to come to this point where you have this final cut. I know you were working on that, and can you talk a little, just briefly about like that, like the decision to kind of like just amend the story in a certain way, where you arrived at this final, I guess like the final cut, and yeah, what were there some sort of like points where you were just kind of like you had to make this decision? Was it kind of like a artistic decision that was, yeah, that you arrived at? Like, how did you arrive at? I should say, because
well,
I know that
I
it was
think,
hard for you.
Yeah, no, it was. You know, every film's like every project's a journey, right? And every film is a journey. And you know, some wise person said that a film's authored 3 times. It was like once in the writing, once in the shooting, and then once in post-production. And for me, I find that to be absolutely true. It's like each stage of the film, as we got there, we were able to take inventory of what we have, and we kind of set the new course with each different phase of the film. I feel blessed that, you know, people, when they make a film, it's like they learn on that one film, and then they move on to the next film and they learn new lessons on the next film, which I'm sure I will. But I feel like I got to make this film multiple times. So each successive version of this film, I got to learn a whole new set of ways of looking at the story. So I artistically, I mean, this film in post-production, we were in post-production for almost 2 years. And that's because, you know, we joke about it. The initial film, the principal photography was only 17 days. And that's all we could afford at the time, which I hear is pretty short. We were ambitious in trying to do a 90-page screenplay in 17 days. So we joke. We did make our schedule. Actually, we did shoot what we have a great producer, Connie Flores, who kept us on schedule, and then our scripty Caitlin, she was amazing at keeping me on schedule. But we have a joke that principal photography was for 17 days, but then we did 2 years of pickups. And it was true, because like as we're going into post-production, I'd see like, man, this storyline would be so much more interesting if we could just shoot this one extra scene, or this, you know, one extra line of dialogue. So Danny was such an amazing team player that we had this, her main outfit is the blue dress, and we'd always say like, hey Danny, you know, where's that blue dress? And she's like, okay. And so sometimes during pickups, it would just be myself, Danielle Zalapany, and Ryan Miyamoto. We'd just go out and, like, you know, go get the shots we need. And they were so willing to do that. And each time we'd come back with more footage, when I applied it to the film, you know, different storylines were started to be evident. And some of the things that we see in this film currently, without giving away too much if you haven't seen the film yet, those things kind of, you know, developed in post-production. Like I was saying, some of the Wool character, I don't know if we were saying it while we were online, but, you know, he had a lot larger of a role in the original cuts or previous cuts. And we decided to trim it back because we felt it would strengthen the through line, which was the Kea's story. But it, you know, at one point it was just as much about, I mean, it still is in a different way, but it was just much about the Wool character's struggle as it was about Kea's character. but it all changed in post-production. And sometimes we'd go too far surreal, and then leave the narrative behind for too long, and then that was why we'd have to cut. And I think there's at least 1/3 of the picture that never actually got into the final cut. So we shot a lot of scenes and a lot of characters that characters didn't make it in the film. And I apologize to the people who haven't seen it yet, who did shoot their scenes with me and dedicate themselves to the project. It just ended up being, I think the story became clearer as we moved along. And being my first feature film, like I said, I got to learn so much from it. And hopefully I'll take that into the next picture.
No, that's so insightful, that what you said. That just kind of gives me an idea of like the process that you went through in getting this film to this point. And I mean, as an artist, I think you never, it's your baby, and you just never, you have to let it go at some point, you realize, but it's like in your mind, you're kind of continually reworking it. And it's just, it's just, I just was curious about that. And because we are running a bit low on time, I wanted to kind of ask a little bit about, you and Nicole both spoke about, and you've kind of given us a good sense of working within this very kind of like tight-knit community in Hawaii, and just having like resources like among friends and family, the people you consider friends and family, helping you throughout mounting this project and also other potential projects in the future. I guess I wanted to ask both of you to talk a little bit about being advocates for your community. I know Chris, just because we've been participating in different initiatives to not only with this project but elsewhere, but just being advocates for local Native-centered media creation. And how do you see that influencing you as a not just an artist, but as a person? I guess this is a very kind of perhaps slightly philosophical question, but just like as advocates for local indigenous media production, balancing that out with like your aspirations to be a successful filmmaker, an artist in your chosen industry.
Nicole.
It's a loaded question.
Client losing their, I'm sorry. What was
okay.
the?
Maybe Chris, you can start.
Okay, so she was talking about advocacy and how our advocacy within the community affects our affects us as filmmakers and
as people as well as
people.
Like how does it like it's kind of a personal yet philosophical question.
Well, I can start it off and then she can follow it up.
It affects us as people, like within the film.
Not just beyond the film, beyond the film, just like, because you guys have spoken so passionately about working with such a tight-knit community. And Nicole, you spoke about how much untapped talent there is in Hawaii. And it's a shame that, the mainstream industry hasn't really taken stock of that fact. And that I pretty much just said this film could be that gateway film for folks to kind of like, especially industry embedded folks, to see that, okay, there is this talent there. And it's just like you as ambassadors to kind of like bridge those communities. Not that they're like separate, but they are a little bit, distinctive in their own kind of, way.
I hear that. I mean, for me personally, I definitely don't view myself as any sort of ambassador. I think that, all we can do is tell our story. And I think that Chris did an amazing job of holding up a mirror. We weren't trying to make poverty porn, and we weren't trying to create some sort of massive call to action. I think that we realized that there was elements to the story of this space that weren't being discussed, and does that make us ambassadors of some sort? I mean, I don't know, but I definitely feel like, or I would hope that if anything, it would encourage people from any space to to be authentic and courageous with telling an authentic story. Because I feel like that's kind of what it comes down to, is being able to speak on what you know about and just be honest about it. And from our perspective, or at least from mine, you know, having a Native Hawaiian perspective in a feature narrative to touch on some of these things, it wasn't necessarily something that existed. As Chris stated before, we're spoken about almost in a, I mean, Hawaii, the term objectification becomes literal. I mean, it's like literal, we are a postcard in a backdrop that a set designer picked, so that like in the rom-com when they're talking about a honeymoon, you know what I mean? It's like the level of deterioration that has happened to even our words, of our own native tongue, which was banned, which we had to fight for the right to be able to speak our language. I mean, literally just with Kalekoa, literally just had to fight. Again, this is only a couple of years ago, to be able to speak Hawaiian in a courtroom. Even though even though it is one of the official languages here. So to have all of that in the context, and then you see a film made in Hollywood with our language as the title, you know, whether that's, I don't want to list films, but they exist. There's a ton of them. And so to, you know, to just blindly, I'm going to name a film, you know, whatever Hawaiian word, with zero regard to the fact that there is still a living people here who survived a genocide, and we still exist, and we have stories to tell. You know, it's important, and one thing that I think within the Hawaiian community, and even to speak to the importance of being inspired by nature, is recognizing how small you are in the context of the collective. And I'm speaking even in terms of time, of what a blip on the radar we are. And we were speaking even with, it was Brother Nolan, Chris, we were talking to about this, when he has his phenomenal song in our film called Look What They've Done, as a song about Waikīkī. But we spoke about the importance of knowing that you're a part of a continuum. Like, is this film even necessarily for us, or is this something that I want to make sure rips the Band-Aid off, so that somebody who just got born today will watch it in a social studies class when they're in high school, and then their kid actually proposes a bill when they're in the House of Reps that makes, you know what I mean? It's like, we are such a tiny little bit, like, me to think of myself as an ambassador is, would assume that I'm even relative to this time period or space. You know, I think it's important for us to always recognize how our impacts are small and large at the same time, but to know that we're just a part of a continuum, and it has to do with kuleana at the end of the day, of it just so happens that these are the gifts that Chris and I have. And it's a responsibility to kind of do your part of, like, you know, I wish I was a good writer. Unfortunately, nope, that's not my job. You know, Chris's job is to tell amazing stories. And so as a part of the community, it's like, cool, we know our jobs, we'll go do that.
Yeah,
I don't know if that.
No, you crystallized what I was trying to ask you. It's very eloquently put, so I appreciate that. Chris, I mean, and very quickly, I just wanted to ask, I know this film is going to Hawaii International Film Festival next. You're going to be screening this with local audiences, in person, I believe, and also online. So I wonder, I know this really early on, but I mean, I guess, what reaction do you anticipate from local audience, and also so far what you've gotten so far from folks who've seen it? I know at Urban Whirl, which was just not long ago, and then our festival is just like happening now and ending now. But just like, how do you see this film circulating moving forward? Like, what do you want? I know you want it in educational spaces, but also, like, you know, like, yeah, how do you, yeah, and then also like your.
No, you know, I getting to screen at the Hawaii International Film Festival is a huge honor, because it's always been one of the major influences on me as a young filmmaker. It's like when I was growing up, my mom was a fan of the Hawaii International Film Festival, and I'd back then tickets were free. So but you'd have to stand in line. So if you want to see a film, no matter where it was playing, you just have to be in line and make the cut, right? So my mom used to go and watch a film, and she'd have me stand in line in the other line for the next film. And so I'd get to see these films that I would never have even imagined seeing, you know. So that experience really opened my worldview up. It was like traveling for a kid from Wamanalo. It's like, you know, the farthest I've ever went at that time, I think, was like, you know, Waianae, or, you know, Honolulu was the mall was like a trip, right? So getting to experience that at HIF, Hawaii International Film Festival, you know, it comes full circle. Not me getting to premiere a film in the festival. It's a huge honor. I'm really looking forward to it. Besides, you know, how much I love HIF, it's so far it'll be the first time to get to see it in a theater. Which
I mean, I look forward to that homecoming. I hope to drop in on it, and we've run out of time, so I would love to continue this chat, and then maybe this could be part 2, could be at HIF. But I wanted to thank you guys, and I know I look forward to this film circulating, you know, beyond the festival circuit, and like landing. I know we're in COVID times right now, but landing in VOD and maybe like some in-person theater screenings that wherever cities can hold those right now. I want to thank Chris and Nicole for like this lovely conversation. I could go on and on. I feel like we need to have drinks and go on and on about this at some point. But I want to thank you guys, everyone here, for joining us. And for folks here, I just wanted to say, if you did enjoy this conversation and the festival lineup that you've seen this year, I want you guys to, you know, please consider donating to Visual Communications. This is our 50th year. And just to remind you that the support helps sustain our year-round operations and programming. You can do that by going to vcmedia.org, and to follow us on social media accounts. It's at VC Film Festival, and you can tag us this year on hashtag LAAPFF 2020. And to close us out, I want to invite my esteemed colleague, Esio Verlasa, who I believe is maybe crying right now because we're at the end of our festival. We've been running for 6 weeks. Okay, so there she is. Sorry, guys. I mean, thank you guys so much, and please stay for our after party if you're available. Yeah.
I'm not crying yet, but thank you for following my personal note, Lindy. Thank you, Lindy, for leading that.
Crying.
I'm crying in my heart, but I'll probably be crying soon. If you want to see me cry, come to the award ceremony tomorrow at Facebook and YouTube. It'll be 12 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. I may or may not be crying for that for sure. But thank you, Lindy. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nicole, for that wonderful conversation. And thank you for all of our filmmakers that participated in today. And thank you especially to you guys for hanging out with us for all of these 6 weekends of C3 Converse. And it's essentially 6 weekends of the festival. And who knew that we would have 6 weekends of the festival?